Welcome to the Dr. OK Show. I am Dr. OK, and you may have been expecting the SportsZu today, but you get me instead because we have a lot of year-end content to go through. So today we get the end-of-year grades part 2 with the men's SmackDown roster instead. So again, I just want to note that we care more about championships, then we care about wins, and then after that, we will consider just about everything else, particularly showing up, and that's really going to come into play a couple of times today. So with that, let's get to it and grade every man on the SmackDown roster for how well they did in 2024. Plus, then we will also hit all of the free agents and all of the men that got released, no matter what brand they happen to be on, or even some NXT stars as well. So in total, we've got 53 grades to hand out, so no more wasting any time. Let's get to it with our number one ranked person, who is, of course, the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. What else is there to say about Cody Rhodes that hasn't already been said? He won the Royal Rumble for the second straight year, and he finished his story at WrestleMania. Then he just kept on rolling, winning the Crown Jewel Championship, and of course, he is still the champion. But most importantly, he tied for the lead with 3 OK Awards for Male Superstar of the Year, Male Match of the Year for his match against Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, and for Best Beyond the Mat moment, which admittedly he was the one that was getting bloodied by the final boss in that moment. But let's get back inside the ring, where he went 21-3 in all matches, including a nearly spotless 16-1 one-on-one record. And so, of course, he may have made some bad life choices at the end of the year, and his neck and spine paid for that with a package pile driver, but he still, of course, had the best winning percentage of any wrestler who had at least 10 matches, so we will, of course, give him that very perfect A+. Up second is LA Knight. Yeah, and if 2023 was his breakout year, 2024 was where he solidified himself as the megastar, as it was his second straight year with the most matches on SmackDown, and he was just one win off from leading all of the males on SmackDown in wins for the second straight year, going 28-1. And he defeated Logan Paul at SummerSlam for his first ever singles championship, winning the US title, and he had 7 successful title defenses, so he will get an A. Up third, we have a steep drop from the first 2 men on this list, and it also shows the difference in one show being at 3 hours for most of the year, while the other show was only at 2 hours, so we got a lot less matches and a lot less opportunities on SmackDown. Nonetheless, Tommaso Ciampa was over 500 at 13-12-1, and it was him having 2 one-on-one wins, which pushed him above the next group, including his own partner on DIY, and he is indeed a 2-time and the current tag team champion with Johnny Gargano, so for that achievement, he will get a B+. Alright, so let's get to that next group with Tama Tonga kicking it off. I know you're surprised to see him this soon on the list, but he has the 4th best winning percentage of all the SmackDown men with a 12-5-1 record, and indeed he was a tag team champion earlier in the year and is the right-hand man of the person who ended 2024 as the Tribal Chief, which also makes him one of many recipients of the Best Group or Faction OK Award that we handed out last week. And yeah, this was an impressive rookie year, so we'll give him a B. Up next is Montez Ford, and like Ciampa, his first and only one-on-one win puts him ahead of his own tag partner on this list, so he ended up 12-9-1 overall, but couldn't quite get over the edge to win a tag team title, and this will definitely not go down as one of the top years for the Street Profits, so we'll give Montez a C+. Up next is Randy Orton, and unfortunately his year was cut short by a pile driver by his former friend Kevin Owens, and unfortunately that sent him to the hospital bed and he has not yet recovered. But we did see that the Viper still has plenty of venom in him, going 8-2-1 in one-on-one matches, but he was much less impressive overall, ending at just 12-10-2, and that also meant that he came up short in all 3 of his title matches, and indeed also lost in the finals of the King of the Ring tournament, and in fact both of his one-on-one losses were to the ring general Gunther. Nonetheless, it was still a really good year in the ring for the Apex Predator, and he gets an A-. Up next is Johnny Gargano, and he had an even 12-12-1 record, but when he figured out how to do whatever it takes, he became a 2-time WWE Tag Team Champion with Tommaso Ciampa, so that's how you DIY it. So that will give him a B+. Up next is Andrade, and he made an immediate impact on his return after the Royal Rumble, winning 10 of his next 11 matches, but a 7-game series with Carmelo Hayes cooled him off, so he ended at just 11-10-1, but he certainly wowed the crowd all the way throughout, so he'll still get a B-. Angelo Dawkins is next, and I'll admit it's a tough break for the Profits as they were 11-9-1 in their tag team record, which is better than DIY's 11-11-1, but they got no gold to show for it. And he lost his only one-on-one match to end at 11-10-1, but he'll still get the same grade as Ford, so a C+. Kevin Owens is next, and we all know that KO is right. But his record is just 10-12-2, and he also lost all 4 of his title matches, and yet he is the Winged Eagle Champion. And that for me is plenty good enough, so he'll get a B+. Jacob Fatu is indeed the Samoan werewolf, and it's hard to believe that he can ever lose any match. And he rarely did at 8-2-1, and he actually won the new Bloodline, the tag team titles with Tama Tonga before handing it over to Tongaloa to be Sikoa's personal protector. And he is a recipient of the Best Grouper Faction OK Award, so he gets an A. Braun Strowman's up next, and he had an 8-5-1 overall record and an even more impressive 6-2-1 one-on-one record. And with those records, he probably should get a title shot every now and then, and he also became the GOAT of last man standing matches by defeating Big Bronson Reed, and yet somehow he's still the only official transfer window move over to SmackDown. And if he only didn't miss 7 total months due to 2 different injuries, he'd probably have an even higher grade, but we'll still give him a B. Santos Escobar is the leader of Legado del Fantasma, and he both talks and cheats a pretty good game, but he couldn't quite get over the hump with 2 title match losses and finished at 8-10 overall, but a more respectable 7-5 one-on-one record. Though I admit, I think there's more to him than what we got this year, but for now, right down the middle with a C. Solo Sikoa. Well, he needed to put food back onto the family's table, so he took the Ula Fala and ran with it to become the tribal chief through the end of the year at least. And he also added the Tongans and Jacob Fatu to the new bloodline and made them stronger and more vicious. And he also got the tag team titles back into the bloodline before his older brothers became too jealous of that success. And he was about to capture the undisputed WWE title at SummerSlam before his own cousin decided to get off the couch and tried to starve his own family. And with that kind of adversity from his own family, I don't know how anyone could have a good record, so he ended at 8-11-1 overall and a very disappointing 2-7-1 one-on-one record. But there's probably not a person in history that got so little respect for trying to do what's best for his family. So he at least got an okay for being a part of the best group or faction, and in fact, he was the leader of it, so he gets a B. Carmelo Hayes is up next, and if general managers could get themselves fired for bad draft picks in the WWE draft, well, Nick Aldis may be taking a walk, as his first round pick of Carmelo Hayes was a complete bust in his rookie year, going 7-14-3, and he's the only SmackDown wrestler of either gender to hit double-digit one-on-one losses, going 6-10-3. And it'd be even worse for Hayes if he didn't have the two luckiest wins of the year, first when AJ Styles injured himself during their match, and then when Braun Strowman threw him back into the ring right before the count of 10. That said, he did seem to learn a few things from his early losses to Andrade, so perhaps if he could mind his mouth a little bit and stick to using his brain, maybe he has a chance in the future, but for 2024, he gets a D. Up next is Austin Theory, and he did win the SmackDown tag titles that very quickly became the WWE tag titles at WrestleMania, and that was pretty much it for his highlights, as A-Town Down Under went 5-11 in all tags, and he finished a pretty pathetic 6-17-1 overall. So I think it's safe to say it's time to ditch Waller and get his head back on straight, but for this year, he gets a D. And speaking of Waller, Grayson Waller is up next, and except for having one less no contest, he has the same record as Theory at 6-17-1, and his mouth simply writes checks that neither of them can cash, as they had the worst records of anyone with 20 or more matches. But their winning at WrestleMania saves them from an F, so he too gets a D. Berto is up next, and he has one less loss than Angel, so he comes first and finishes at 5-10 overall, but Los Garza was at least a respectable 4-4 in traditional tags, so he'll get a D-. Angel has that extra loss, so he's 5-11 overall, but perhaps Legado del Fantasma can get their act together next year, and for now, it's a D-. So that takes us to Roman Reigns, and if you're counting at home, he is tied for the 20th most wins on this list of SmackDown-only superstars at a 4-2 overall record. Yeah, that is 20th on SmackDown only. That does not include the Monday Night Raw roster. And on top of that, he has 0 one-on-one wins for the entire year, and had just one successful title defense before becoming the villain in somebody else's hero's journey storybook ending. And he also had a hand in taking the food off of the table by costing the family both the WWE Championship and the WWE Tag Team titles. So that's certainly a guy that everyone should be wildly cheering, right? And yes, I still awarded him with 2 OKs this year. First for Best Group or Faction as the OTC, and then one also for Match of the Year, where he played the pivotal role of loser. But per my rules of combat, you do get a grade bump for getting those OK awards, so I will follow my own rules and give him a C. Up next is Chris Sabin, and that continues our weird trend with these tag teams where he has one less loss, so that puts him above his partner of Alex Shelley. And the Motor City Machine Guns are 4-2 in all tag team matches and became tag champs in just their 3rd match, which amazingly only took 2 weeks to accomplish. But then of course they already dropped those titles already, and while they look like generic creative fighters to me on WWE 2K, well, results matter the most here, and they are pretty good, so we'll give them a B. Alex Shelley did indeed lose his one-on-one match to Johnny Gargano, so he's 4-3 overall, but nothing else different to say than what we did for Sabin, so he will also get a B. Tongaloa of the New Bloodline, he is kind of the forgotten man in the group, having suffered both an eye injury early on, so he wasn't even a part of the tag team title match that brought those titles to the New Bloodline, and then later on he was also injured in the War Games match, and he is out indefinitely. Nonetheless, he is still above 500 at 4-3-1 and gets an okay for best group or faction, but unfortunately he was mostly pretty disappointing and there's nothing to get excited about here, so we're still only going to give him a D+. Logan Paul is the only official transfer out of SmackDown and to Raw, but he was only on SmackDown for the 2024 year, so we will keep him in this group instead. And he was the US champion all the way until SummerSlam, but that was probably only because he had 2 title defenses in that entire time, and he lost his title match to Cody Rhodes, where he had the chance to become a double champion, but alas, he lost and he fell to 3-4 for the year. And as you well know, we do not like champions who don't show up for work, and he also doesn't have an okay to bail him out here, but he is still our YouTube Lord and Savior, so we'll give him a C+. Shinsuke Nakamura is up next, and he decided not to report to SmackDown after the WWE draft for 7.5 months, and Nick Aldis still rewarded him with a title shot before he even had his first match upon his return. And there is our axiom at work where if you give someone a title shot who doesn't deserve it, well, they just might win, and so he did. So he ends the year at 3-8, and as the US champion, so that certainly counts for something, and we'll give him a C-. AJ Styles was not very phenomenal this year, so here's the hoping that his next appearance will be for him to announce his actual retirement, which he should have done before embarrassing himself in October after sitting on the sidelines for 3.5 months, because he had simply lost over and over again and had no other opportunities. So he ends the year at 3-8-1 with 3 title match losses. It's time to admit that it is over, so he gets a D-. Apollo Crews is next, and there was a time when Crews can't lose, but that was many, many moons ago, as he was 2-9 this year with his only wins over Giovanni Vinci, so he gets an F. Jimmy Uso way down here and below Apollo Crews. Whoo, baby! He is nothing like his twin brother, who got an A yesterday, and he also lost to that brother at WrestleMania, and then got himself smashed nearly to death by his other brother, Solo Sikoa, right after that on SmackDown. And then when he finally returned, he got injured again, breaking a toe at War Games, but that was his only win of the year, so he finished at 1-5. Overall, he does still get an okay for best group or faction, so that will help him out a little bit, just like he helped out Roman Reigns to get a win at Bad Blood, so he'll get a C-. That takes us to Giovanni Vinci, and he got kicked out of Imperium earlier in the year and then embarrassed himself when he finally stopped skiing in the Alps and came back to SmackDown, and he ended at 1-9-1, so he of course will get an F. Elton Prince and Kit Wilson are showing up together because they had no matches without the other, and overall they were 1-11, and there are still no signs of Pretty Deadly the Musical, which I admit would bump up their grade a few notches, but it didn't happen, so they get an F. Ashanti the Adonis still shows up on the SmackDown roster on WWE.com, so hey, we'll leave him in this list right now. But he is pretty much hanging out just in NXT and has an 0-1 record on SmackDown, so he gets an F. And his supposed partner, Cedric Alexander, is doing pretty much the same thing, except he was 0-2 on SmackDown. So I guess those two never materialized as a tag team on SmackDown, and he will also get an F. Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows of the OC are up next, and at least they showed up for AJ Styles' fake retirement earlier in the year, and here's to hoping that they show up for the real retirement soon, because they're not doing much showing up on SmackDown otherwise. They went 0-3 and also get an F. Alright, that's our regular roster lineup, so let's touch on the free agents next. And we will start with the final boss, The Rock. He won his only match with Roman Reigns in the main event of night 1 of WrestleMania, which was a very clutch victory because it meant that the title match the following night would be under Bloodline rules. But he also had to resort to threatening to fire the ref if he called anything the way The Rock didn't like it. So, I don't know, I guess that's alright. And he gets more OKs than he has matches here, which is pretty strange, as he gets 1 for Best Group or Faction as a part of the Bloodline, and also 1 for Best Beyond the Mat Moment for pummeling a bloody Cody Rhodes and putting his own blood on that belt made for Mama Rhodes. So let's hope the final boss will be back finally in 2025, but in 2024, he did pretty well when he showed up, so we'll give him a B. John Cena, he kept his streak going with a 6-man tag win with the Awesome Truth on the Raw after WrestleMania, so he finished the year at 1-0, and we'll certainly see a lot more of him in 2025, but for 2024, he gets a D. Pat McAfee lost his dignity, which we pointed out in our In Memoriam segment on the OK Awards, by eliminating himself from the Royal Rumble when he was too scared to face Braun Breaker and Omos, so he went 0-1 on the year without ever getting touched, so that is obviously an F. These next guys all can be found in NXT and went 0-1. Javier Bernal, Dante Chen, and Kale Dixon. But for the main roster, they get an F. Omos, wow, where has the big guy gone? At least he scared McAfee, but then he went on to lose in the Rumble and lost in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, and we haven't seen from him since, so he gets an F. And lastly, this group is no longer with us. First, we had Ricochet, who was on Raw. He went 4-2 in one-on-one matches and then 6-6. Overall, but I'd leave 2 if Braun Breaker speared me through a car that hard, so he gets a C. Then we had Bobby Lashley, and it hurts that the Almighty is gone, but he went 3-3 before he left, and left the Street Profits and B-Fab high and dry, so he gets a D. Odyssey Jones, well, it was quite an August of 2024 that we had there, where he went 2-0, and disappeared from his allegiance with the New Day, just like Big E's allegiance with the New Day disappeared as well. So, Odyssey Jones will get a D. Jinder Mahal, the former champion, he started the year very strong by sharing the ring with The Rock, and then got a title shot against Seth Rollins, but he lost in that match, and then also lost in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, so he ended at 0-2 and is now gone with a D-. His cohorts Veer and Sangha of Indus they lost 1 tag team match and then also lost in the Battle Royal to go 0-2. They too were gone with Jinder Mahal, and they will get an F. Cameron Grimes apparently left for the moon after going 0-2 this year, so he will also get an F. Baron Corbin made a very unsuccessful return to the main roster and proved that apparently Braun Breaker was doing all the work in their NXT tag team, and he went 0-4 on the main roster, so he will also get an F. Zion Quinn got speared into oblivion by Braun Breaker in just 6 seconds, and he went 0-1, so he of course gets an F. Bo Morris lost his 1 tag match, but perhaps you'll see more of him later on the main roster, so he gets an F. Vincent Winey whined his way out of NXT after losing to Odyssey Jones in his 1 main roster appearance, so he finished at 0-1, But a little birdie tells me that you may now be able to find him in Harlem, but for his main roster debut, he gets an F. So that finishes today's very long list of 53 names, so I again will get my second A+ in 2 days. But if you missed the grades for Raw yesterday, be sure to go right on over here to check that out. Because if you don't, you will get yet another F and another not okay.